Hello, dear listener. Please subscribe to our channel. Enjoy watching. Just in the restaurant, the song for you was playing softly, and Rachel and I were leisurely moving to the simple beat, enjoying a pleasant evening. We were invited there by our friends who decided to throw a 70s-style party in honor of their anniversary. There weren't many guests, mostly close friends and family. Josh and Linda were celebrating 10 years of their life together, and they had come up with this style of celebration. And many, especially their parents and older folks, even enjoyed the idea, as it allowed them to briefly reminisce about their youthful years. For us, it was just a diverse evening with its own quirks and charms. After the dance, we returned to our table and one of the guests decided to stand out and propose a toast to the event's main characters. While he was giving his speech, we pretended to listen attentively, though in reality we were more focused on the snacks and the decorations and the overall atmosphere. Then the music started again, but hardly anyone was dancing. It seemed like the guests had decided to replenish their internal energy supplies and stayed at their tables to drink and snack. I decided to step outside to have a smoke and maybe eavesdrop on what others were talking about. Thus, almost everyone here knew each other, and those who also went outside quickly found common ground and chatted about various topics. I, for the time being, stayed on the sidelines and simply observed. The fresh air was invigorating, and I actually enjoyed being alone for a while. However, my solitary moment didn't last long. It's in just a few minutes, a tall man with long sideburns and a thin mustache approached me. "Good evening," he greeted. "Hello," I replied, and I noticed how he carefully assessed me, or more precisely, my appearance, even though I looked quite ordinary for a party. "Oh, I see you don't know me," he continued. "Not many people here do. I recently moved to the city, and I'm Josh's nephew, Anthony Gross." "Well, Anthony, nice to meet you," I replied, extending a polite hand for a handshake. "You can call me Patrick." Then he shook my hand, and I became curious about what might have piqued his interest in me, or perhaps he just wanted to get to know everyone at the party. "And you?" he began to ask slowly. "I'm just a friend of Josh and Linda. Did you come from far away?" "I noticed your accent." "Yes. I've lived in England for a long time, and then I had to move to Spain for work, where I've been living for the past 3 years. And now here we are in California." "Oh, I couldn't help but notice your beautiful companion." "Is she your wife?" "I assume." "You're right, she's my wife," I said. I found it a bit strange and suspicious that he was so interested in my wife. But could this self-absorbed guy be trying to make a move on her, and was his question an attempt to gather some information? I was about to ask him about his job to steer the conversation away from my wife, when he seemed to read my thoughts, and gracefully wrapped up the conversation. "Oh, it seems I'm being called," he said, looking through the large windows of the building at one of the tables. "Well, we'll see each other again," he added and walked back inside. I finished my cigarette and followed him back into the venue. I wanted to observe this peculiar individual a bit more, who had somehow entered my life in such a strange way. As I walked back to our table, I tried to spot Anthony, but he had vanished, as if he had evaporated, which I actually found pleasant, as my initial impression of him was not entirely positive. Is something wrong? My wife noticed my unease. What? No, everything's fine. Didn't you miss? Without me? Oh, I didn't have a chance. You came back so quickly. I got up and decided to go look for Josh. His nephew had firmly occupied my mind, and I wanted to learn more about him. I found my friend sitting at one of the distant tables, engrossed in a conversation with a sweet old lady. Josh, could you take a break? I wanted to talk to you. I interrupted him. Yes, Patrick. Right now. Just a minute. Excuse me? Mrs. Choice, we'll discuss your poodle later. He bid farewell to the old lady and gestured for me to step aside. You came just in time. Her complaints about her dog were starting to get to me. What's on your mind? Well, nothing really. I recently met your nephew. He mentioned that he just arrived. Oh yes. That's right. We haven't seen him in years. He's grown quite a bit. I noticed he has a unique style. Yes, you're right. When he came here, I didn't recognize him right away. He's even changed his character. Being a valet has taken a bit of a toll on his character, explained Josh. What? A valet? I couldn't help but chuckle. Yes. Why? What's wrong with that? Nothing, it's just that he spoke as if he were some kind of military or diplomatic personnel. Never mind. I probably just made some incorrect assumptions. Is he back for good or just visiting? He told us he's here temporarily until he finds another job. We've even assigned him a room because he has no one else in this city. You remember my sister and her husband died in a car accident a few years ago. That's something no one would wish for. Let's not talk about the sad stuff. You tell me, how was your evening? I think it went really well. I really wanted to book a band to do all the songs. But then I decided their voices weren't going to replace the original singers, so I went with the jukebox. You're right. The evening is wonderful. Oh, isn't that Linda looking for you? I spotted her wandering among the guests, looking for someone. Maybe she's looking for me. I'll go find out what she needs. Ash went over to his wife and I decided to return to my table. For some reason, I didn't want to leave my wife alone for too long this evening. As I approached our table, I saw that amusing man again, but this time he was sitting next to Rachel, whispering something in her ear, and she, seemingly enchanted, was listening to him, paying no attention to anyone else. You again. I turned to him. Will you leave us? I demanded of him rather than asked. Oh, Patrick, we meet again. Your wife is just lovely. You're so lucky. He replied. I can handle it myself. Bet they're waiting for you there? I was starting to feel his insolence taking over, and I was getting sick of it. Anthony looked at me, and I noticed a sense of hurt and indignation in his gaze, as if I had taken something valuable away from him. Yes, I'm leaving. He tried to restrain his emotions. "I's talking to you, Rachel." Then he took her hand and kissed her knuckles. At that moment, I had an inexplicable urge to hit those lips so hard that he would know his place. However, I understood that my jealousy was flaring up, even though there was no real reason for it. But I still felt extremely uncomfortable seeing him next to my wife. Anthony walked away, and I took my seat at the table. "Why were you so rude?" "He just came over to say hello. He's a pretty nice young man. He told me he's an orphan. Poor thing. Going through all that. You shouldn't be so aggressive towards him." My wife said, "Actually, I wasn't being aggressive. I just don't like everyone licking your hands." But still, I asked rather abruptly. "Well, never mind," she replied, showing that my tone had hurt her. Something had gone wrong at that moment. You see, I realized, and I blamed it on Anthony, who seemed determined to invade our family, and it upset me. Listen, but I didn't want to ruin my friend's evening with it, so I decided to pull myself together and forget the unpleasant feeling. "He's just strange. I don't want him hovering around you, especially since he was working as a simple servant somewhere overseas." "So what?" "So the man was unlucky enough to get a fancy job. So what now? Should we sue him? Since when did you become such a—" "Like what?" "Well, like this. Why are you even picking on him?" His tech success entirely. I myself didn't know why this man had bothered me, but something about him definitely didn't sit right with me. I apologized to my wife for my absurd behavior, since I wanted to enjoy the evening without arguments, which had become more frequent between us recently. We continued to have fun socializing with other guests, and Anthony no longer bothered us. I had completely lost sight of him, but that even made me happy. When I returned home, Rachel and I got into an unpleasant conversation. She reminded me of my tactless behavior towards Anthony. It seemed like she was defending him even though she didn't know anything about him. Soon my feelings of jealousy resurfaced, and I expressed my dissatisfaction, which led to an argument. Once again, she tried to paint me as a selfish person only concerned with my own interests. Not wanting to continue our quarrel, I decided to leave and headed to a 24-hour bar, hoping that by the time I got home, Rachel would have calmed down and stopped pestering me for no reason. As I sat at the bar sipping my drink, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was constantly watching me. I turned around a few times, but didn't see anyone who could be spying on me. All the people present were busy with their own activities, emptying their glasses and shot glasses. About an hour later, when I was tired of sitting in a drinking establishment and was about to leave, I thought I caught a glimpse of Anthony standing in a dark corner. I turned and looked closer, but he wasn't there, just some dude on the phone. I was so excited. I went home trying to forget the haunting ghost I'd conjured up for myself. The next day, I contacted Josh and asked if he could meet with me. When he agreed, I arranged to meet him at the same pub I had visited the previous night. In the evening, I shared my unpleasant feelings with him and explained how I had argued with my wife because of it. Yeah, you're right. I probably just imagined it. But jealousy, alcohol, and everything mixed together took their toll. I just can't shake the feeling that someone has entered Rachel's life, someone other than me. And I don't know what to do about it. I confessed. Relax, my friend. You're just tired. When was the last time you had a vacation? And your wife is just stunning. That's why you're jealous of everyone who pays attention to her. Has she ever given you a reason to doubt her? He tried to comfort me. No, she hasn't. I just am the way I am. I don't know what I would do if I found out she wanted to cheat on me. Why did you even think that she might be seeing someone else? I don't know. It's just a feeling. And we've been arguing a lot lately. Oh well, that's not a reason. Many couples argue. Linda and I have our share of disagreements from time to time. It's normal. I wanted to believe Josh and his words made sense. At some point, I accepted his advice to relax and stop overthinking things. I left our meeting with a calm mind and a clear conscience. Josh always knew how to support and calm me down. I returned home in high spirits, even willing to apologize to my wife for my jealousy outburst. When I entered the house, I noticed Rachel in a cheerful mood. She was sitting in the living room on the couch, listening to classical music, probably Beethoven. Oh, you're back already? That's great. Will you be having dinner? She asked. I'm not very hungry right now, actually. I'll be later. Did you decide to have a little celebration? I noticed a bouquet of flowers in a vase on the table. Oh no, I'm just relaxing. This music is unexpectedly pleasant to the ears. It's even somewhat inspiring. Anthony gave me some advice on how to enjoy my evening. Just hearing that name, which I never expected to hear from my wife again, sent me spiraling back into a fit of hysteria. What? Anthony? When did he have time to give you advice? I demanded. I ran into him by pure chance today at the store. He invited me to have a cup of coffee with him, and we got to talking. You shouldn't have been so hard on him yesterday. He's very well-mannered and polite. What? Coffee with him? And did he give you those flowers too? I snatched the bouquet and vase, then hurled them against the wall. How long will this scoundrel keep pestering us? Hey, what are you doing? Rachel yelled. Have you gone completely mad? Oh, you! I jumped up and leaned over her, feeling a lot of anger at the fact that she was dating him. Are you out of your mind? What are you freaking out about? She got up from the couch, not letting me catch myself. Since when is drinking coffee with a friend a crime? I sat back down on the couch, trying to regain control over my emotions. Maybe I had indeed overreacted, and she was innocent. I'm sorry. That was completely due in affirmations. I don't even know what got into me. I tried to rectify the situation. Fool. What did he ever do to you to make you hate him so much? Are you jealous of Josh too? Even though you know I've seen him and Linda at the coffee shop more than once. You should see a psychiatrist. You've gone crazy. Rachel went into the kitchen and banged on something in the cabinets. She came back almost immediately, broom and dustpan in hand, and went to the shards to clean up the mess I'd made. I sat on the couch and watched her pick up the shards. I knew I had done wrong to her, and it was all my stupid jealousy that was to blame. But I couldn't help it when she flared up. That was just the way I was, and she'd known it when she'd married me 8 years ago. But before, I'd always tried to keep my emotions in check and not give in to them. Besides, Rachel had never given me a reason to doubt her. Maybe Josh was right when he said that I had just been exhausted lately and needed to relax. But why couldn't I shake the feeling that something was different in our relationship now? Sometimes it seemed like Rachel was deliberately provoking me. Or was she doing it to hide a secret relationship with another man, one I knew nothing about? I approached my wife, offering to help with the cleanup. I hoped that a bit of shared tidying up would help us reconcile and ease my suspicions. At first, I started picking up the glass shards, but it seemed that Rachel didn't want me to help. "Leave it. You've already helped," she said dryly. "I just want to." "Ouch!" she exclaimed, hurting herself with the splinter we had managed to take together. She looked at the thin puncture on the fingertip bundle from which blood oozed, and then she took her finger in her mouth like a child and looked at me reproachfully. "Did you hurt yourself?" "Let me see," I worriedly said. "Leave me alone." She snorted, and leaving everything behind, she got up and headed into the kitchen to the sink to wash the wound. The wound then went to the cabinet for a Band-Aid. "Kate, come on!" I'm concerned. I caught up with her in the kitchen as she was rummaging through the first aid kit. "Why are you acting this way? Just tell me, is there someone else in your life?" "What?" She paused, momentarily distracted from her task. "What nonsense are you spewing?" "Rachel, I just want to know. You've been acting different lately. Just always going somewhere, often in a bad mood." "Is her pleasantly in a bad mood?" "Have a look at yourself. You're jealous of me every chance you get. You've gone crazy. What made you even think that?" I sat down on a stool facing her. "Just tell me." I stared at her as if trying to penetrate her with my gaze. "No, there's no one else in my life." "Satisfied now?" "You're just paranoid." "Sometimes. I regret marrying you." Rachel's response did calm me down, although her last remark was hurtful. Why did she say that? I hadn't done anything wrong. I just loved her deeply and didn't want to share her with anyone else. I walked over to her and took the Band-Aid from her hand, indicating my willingness to help. Rachel didn't resist, and I applied the adhesive strip to her finger. During this time, we both remained silent. She then quietly returned to finish cleaning the living room. I sat in the kitchen for a while, reminiscing about those early days when Rachel and I had just started dating. Everything had been incredible back then, and our feelings for each other seemed unshakable. Even the first few years of our marriage were blissful, untainted by any issues. I tried to imagine in my mind the moment when our relationship wasn't as strong as it used to be. Yet, I couldn't pinpoint what might have affected her feelings towards me. Rachel returned to the kitchen with the cleaning supplies and, after tossing out the trash, spoke to me in her previous calm tone. "How long are you going to sit here? You said you didn't want to eat," she asked. "Am I in your way?" I inquired. "No, just asking. I'm going to relax." "When you've had enough sitting, join me," she replied and left. I stayed there for a while, thinking about it. And without coming to any conclusion, I went to rest too. I wanted to believe what she said, what she told me. I still loved her, no matter what. Literally quietly, I continued to go to work, and Rachel continued with her painting. She drew pictures and portraits, and lately she'd been drawing illustrations for children's books. She even got a job at one of the publications, and she loved the work, which was flexible and paid well. Then Josh called me and asked if they'd come over for the weekend. I didn't mind at all. On the contrary, I was always happy to see him and Linda at our house. I'd sort of forgotten that his nephew was still visiting, and on the day of his visit to us, they decided to take him with them. "I hope you don't mind. We brought our relative along," Josh told me as he walked through the door. At first, I wanted to object, remembering my unfavorable impression of Anthony after our initial encounter. However, I hoped Josh had briefed him about certain boundaries concerning my wife, and that Anthony wouldn't act as if he was courting Rachel. "Of course, come in. We can't just leave him outside," I quipped. "You haven't visited us for a while. I see you've repainted the living room," Josh observed as he looked around. "Oh no." Rachel decided to change the interior a bit. "I just forgot to mention it," I replied. "She's been at it for the past couple of weeks." "Yeah, it's nice. Really cozy," Linda added as she entered the room. "And where's Rachel?" "I don't see her. She went to the store," I said. "I told her you were coming, so she decided to get a cake and some wine." "That's commendable," Josh said. "Then we'll wait for her. Anthony, please come in. Don't be shy." I watched this man, who strode leisurely through my house and looked at everything around him like a museum exhibit. Without his tuxedo and a simple jacket and pants, he looked like an ordinary guy who had come to the city from the country for the first time. And I even now vaguely believed that he had been to other countries where the houses and interiors were much different from mine, and a man with his history, in my opinion, should have behaved somewhat differently. "Would you like something to drink for now?" I asked Josh and Linda. "I have lemonade, cola, and beer." "Lemonade would be great, right, Josh?" Linda commanded. Josh nodded in agreement. "And your nephew? Is he gonna do anything? I've noticed he's been very quiet today," I asked Josh. "Hey, Anthony, what do you want? Coke or lemonade?" shouted Josh to him. "A stir, doesn't matter." He surveyed the surroundings. I walked slowly toward the kitchen, still glancing at Anthony as I went. It was like I was trying to see something in him, even though I didn't know what it was yet. When I got the drinks, I set the tray on the table and wanted to sit down in my favorite chair. But as soon as I thought of doing that, Anthony immediately placed himself there. The Anthony, that's my chair. Just move to the other one, I said in the quite insolent tone of a landlord. The guy at first apparently didn't understand what was expected of him and looked at us as if he were mentally asking Josh what to do. Anthony, if you'd be so kind, move over, Josh told him. I'm sorry. Pate. He didn't know, he later explained to me. Understand, I said, looking at the little rascal, trying to maintain composure because his childlike innocence was starting to bother me for some reason. Rachel was running late, but Josh and Linda kept me entertained. Josh told jokes that made Anthony laugh uncontrollably, and he shared some stories and news he had learned in the last few days. Linda watched over Anthony more closely. Sometimes it seemed to me like she cared for him as if he were her son, although it was none of my business. But on that day, I sensed that something had changed since the last time I saw them, and they both seemed like they were hiding something. About an hour later, my wife arrived. She greeted everyone quickly and went straight to the kitchen with a bag. I went to her to help and share my new impressions. So, you're coming up with something again, she objected. Oh, what a fantasizer you are. You should only write books. But so strange about him. I'd be curious in someone else's house too. It's perfectly normal. Perfectly normal. Books lately. Butchby and I had been hearing these words quite frequently, as if everyone were trying to convince me that it was the case. Whatever happened, people always said, it's perfectly normal. Even at work, when the courier was late with deliveries, the secretary would say, it's perfectly normal. There might be traffic outside. But this wasn't about work. It was about how these words seemed to haunt me recently. Rachel, you'll notice it yourself after some time. I still don't trust this guy. And why did he leave his job if it was so good for him there? I continued to instill suspicion in her. How would I know? You could ask him yourself. And maybe he has a visa issue or his contract ended. I shouted. My wife looked at me with horror, but I could see from her expression that she was tense and hiding something. I really wanted to know the truth, so I decided to find out right away. My outburst caught the attention of the guests. Josh, being a caring friend, hurried to find out what's happening and joined us in the kitchen. Hey, is everything okay with you guys? Patrick, why are you making a scene? He tried to make a joke, but I was in no mood for it. Nothing. I replied more calmly. It's just that today hasn't gone well. Josh, everything's fine. Go on. Patrick, you too, go. I'll slice the cake now and join you. Oh, Patrick. She continued as I turned to leave, pointing to a bottle of wine. Could you open that? I got the corkscrew out of the drawer. Josh helped me with the glasses, and we headed into the living room. It didn't take long for Rachel to arrive, and soon we were having a good time at the table. I went out on the porch from time to time for a smoke, choosing not to go out at the same time as Anthony. And though everyone tried to convince me that he was very sweet and good-natured, I still disliked him for some reason. If I could, I'd never see him again. Our weekend dragged on to the evening. After sitting around the table and drinking a bottle of wine, the company demanded to continue the fun, and this time I was sent to the store to get wine. I quickly ran to the nearest store so that I could spend less time away from home and not leave my wife and Anthony to socialize without me. When I returned, we decided to continue the fun in our backyard. After 2 glasses, Anthony became more relaxed, and it seemed like he was a different person again. He started presenting himself as a true gentleman once more, and even attempted to tell some jokes, which in my opinion weren't funny and a bit silly. I bet Josh and Linda supported their relative and burst into laughter, pretending to find his jokes genuinely amusing. Rachel, trying to show herself as a hospitable host, also joined in, and to be honest, it infuriated me. "Oh, it seems we're running out of alcohol," Josh remarked. "Yeah, and it's getting late." I hinted that it was time for the guests to leave. By that point, everyone was quite tipsy and a bit tired. Josh realized it was time to wrap up the evening and suggested they go. "Patrick, do you have a regular phone?" "But we left our mobiles at home, and I'd like to call a taxi," he asked. "Yes, of course. It's in the kitchen. Go ahead," I replied. Josh headed towards the house, and I continued to keep an eye on the slightly drunk Anthony to ensure he wouldn't get too close to my wife. "Oh, Rachel, you're such a wonderful hostess," he said it politely, looking at her, but occasionally glancing at me, as if trying to anticipate my actions. But I sat back in my chair and tried to be calm, even though I could feel something inside me starting to stir again, and it wasn't a good feeling. I could hardly wait for Josh to return and tell me they were leaving. As we saw them off, Anthony gave me a strange look similar to how psychopaths look in movies, but I tried not to attach too much significance to it, because they were already leaving and I was beginning to feel relief. Rachel went to clear the table, and I settled down on the couch, wanting to be quiet for a while. But a knock on the door interrupted my intentions, and I went to open it, muttering to myself. Josh was at the door, and I was a little surprised to see him again. After all, they were already pulling away when I closed the door. Actually, an alti of Nens, I looked behind him and saw a cab car waiting for him, and Anthony was looking out the window, staring at me intently. "I think Anthony left his jacket on your porch. Can I go get it?" he asked, standing at the doorstep and waiting for me to let him in. "Oh yes, of course. Go ahead," I replied and took a step to the side to let him in. Josh headed towards the back exit, and for a few seconds, I continued to look at Anthony, who never took his eyes off me. Then I closed the door and was about to return to the living room. However, I heard a strange whisper in the kitchen, which made me decide to check what was happening there. As I entered, Josh and Rachel, as if they had pushed each other away, stared at me with a frightened look. "Did I interrupt something?" I asked sarcastically. They more. "No," my wife replied. "We were just chatting." "Yes, I was asking if Rachel had seen Anthony's jacket," Josh explained, as if justifying himself. Bitchly, I thought it might be the case, But then I noticed that Rachel's clothes were slightly disheveled, and she appeared noticeably nervous. Quick thoughts began to crawl back into my mind. However, I couldn't have imagined that there could be anything more between these two than just friendship. Why don't you tell me what you've really been doing here? I started approaching them. Rachel stepped back, and Josh decided to assume a defensive posture. Patrick, what are you talking about? I just told you. I was simply asking. As for an explanation, somehow I was pretty sure they'd been hugging the moment I'd walked into the kitchen, and their looks and demeanor confirmed it. Bert, what the heck are you doing? Patrick, are you crazy? He continued. But I didn't want to stop. As subcreations, I was sure that he was the one my wife had been cheating on me with, and I had finally caught them. Now I could unleash all my pent-up negative energy on him and punish the jerk for his treacherous actions behind my back. You shut. I yelled at him, continuing to swing my fists. How could you touch my wife? You were my friend, a close friend. I trusted you. Ash tried to defend himself, but he wasn't much of a fighter, and I had the upper hand. Plus my anger, fueled by his betrayal, gave me strength. He tumbled to the floor, and I continued to pummel him. Just then, my wife's voice came from behind. Idiot, what are you doing? That's not him. After those words, I felt a blow to the back of my head. A strong blow from some kitchen utensil made me pause for a moment. Josh managed to free himself and retreated to the other end of the kitchen. My vision was slightly blurred from the impact, but I was still conscious. When I tried to get up, I realized that I couldn't do it right away. Groaning and swearing, I crawled across the floor toward a stool. The idiot, you must not be able to handle your alcohol. You've completely lost it, mumbled Josh. We'll talk when you sober up. After that, he left, and I managed to climb onto the stool. My wife stood to the side with the teapot in her hands, looking at me with fear. Patrick, I'm sorry. You really lost it. How could you even think that? How could you? She stammered. I grumbled. You dare tell me what to do? Oh, you! I tried to reach for her, but a sharp pain in my head prevented me from doing so, and I remained seated on the stool. It's not Josh's fault. You've just gotten so jealous you're seeing things. She put the kettle on. Are you okay? She asked pitifully. I'm sorry. You've just gotten so jealous you're seeing things. She put the kettle on. Are you okay? She asked pitifully. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it so badly. Rachel approached me with the intention of examining the wound on the back of my head, but that turned out to be her mistake. I took advantage of the opportunity and grabbed her by the hair with one hand and her neck with the other, then pushed her backward onto the table, restraining her so she couldn't resist, but still chilly, able to talk. You slut? You thought I wouldn't find out. You did it right here in the kitchen. How could you even dare? I said, wanting to pounce on her again. However, she continued speaking. I know Patrick. Please now. What? No, what? I'll settle the score with him later. Or about with you. I'll deal here and now. and don't care what happens afterward. I'm pregnant. It was only those words that made me stop. I didn't even wonder at first if it was my baby or if she was telling the truth. Maybe she had decided to say that just to stop me from killing her. I realized that I was still angry at her and my friend for betraying me, but the little person inside her was innocent. Pregnant? I released her and returned to my stool. Didn't you hear me properly? But how? You didn't want this all this time. And you were taking those pills. Halt, I stopped taking them 2 months ago. I wanted to tell you, but you've been acting strangely lately, and I even had my doubts. Doubts? About what? I felt that this news was fueling my aggression. However, I remembered all the recent events and more doubts flooded me. Stop. What are you saying? So, you're pregnant with that bastard's child? And you thought I would fall for this. I wanted to attack her again, but she continued speaking. It's yours. I've been pregnant for a month and a half. I don't understand. Sit down. I took her hand and placed her on another stool next to me. Okay, let's assume it's mine. But I saw you with Josh. Now explain to me, what the hell does all this mean? How long have you been with him? And what do you mean by it's not him? Speak up. Well, I can't vouch for myself. I swear, right now, only the child is holding me back. I even took a swing at her to get her scared and tell me the truth. Okay, I'll tell you everything. But promise me you won't do anything to me. For the sake of our baby, please, she cried. What? Don't you dare tell me what to do. I felt my face reddening, and the veins on my face began to bulge with anger. Okay, talk now. Let's see. Promise me, she said. Yes, just speak already. My patience was starting to wear thin. Patrick, in the last few months, you've been so nervous and overly jealous that it's been really upsetting me, and I'm tired of making excuses for you all the time. Recently, after another fight, I just freaked out, and I decided to make sure you don't keep accusing me of cheating on you. She could see that her story was driving me into a rage and hesitated, wondering if she should continue. And then what? Why did you stop talking? I demanded. I'm worried about the baby, she replied. I already said it. Speak. Well, it happened 3 weeks ago. Ush invited me to meet him. I agreed, thinking it was just a friendly lunch, so I went without any suspicion. But when I got there, he brought Anthony along to our meeting. We talked, and he suggested walking me home. We even took a short walk in the park on our way back. He was so charming at the time. Too. Josh, are you telling me you cheated on me with him? I asked. No, it was Anthony. I knew it. I didn't like that guy right away. I knew he wasn't just being friendly. Oh, I couldn't bear it and struck her. Rachel fell to the floor from the blow and cried even louder, pleading for me to spare the baby. How dare you use the child as an excuse? I hissed. Are you carrying his child? No, Patrick. I swear. I found out about the pregnancy before I met him. I didn't know whether to believe her or not. I was feeling full of anger and hatred at the moment, and I really wanted to get to that guy to tear him to shreds. He was far away for now, though, and I figured I'd be sure to get even with him when I got to him. In the meantime, I wanted all the answers, because I could see that Rachel hadn't told me everything yet. On the one hand, I'd had enough of what she'd already told me, and it was causing me unbearable pain and anger. But on the other hand, I wanted to hear the whole story, no matter how much it hurt me. And what happened next? Talk, I insisted. We went out a few times. I thought Josh didn't suspect anything about it, and then Anthony blabbed that he introduced us on purpose. He kind of saw me suffering with you. Well, for his nephew, he wanted a nice and beautiful girl. What? That's complete nonsense. Yeah. And you agreed to that? Damn, you're just twisting everything. You're just twisted. Well, actually, he was very nice, she said, and immediately received another slap. I couldn't stand it when my wife cheated on me and called her lover cute. I paced the kitchen, swearing like a cobbler, not knowing how to calm myself down enough not to snap and kill that woman. If she was telling the truth about carrying my child. I went outside because I felt the need to smoke, hoping that the nicotine would bring me some kind of solution. Leaving Rachel behind, I went to the porch. I stared into the dark road beyond the fence, almost expecting that guy to appear, so I could vent my anger on him. But he didn't show up. Esas que custodies were closed, serially occasional passing cars, and a man walking a small dog on a leash were all that interrupted the darkness. I stood there wondering what I should do with my wife. I wanted to punish her severely for cheating on me, but since she was carrying a child, and I have long dreamed of my child, whom I will love and bring up, change his diapers, teach him to ride a bike. These thoughts of a future son calmed me down a little. And although I was very angry with my wife, I decided to believe her and at least wait until the baby is born. Then I could take a paternity test, which would show me how honest my wife had been with me. I returned to the house. Rachel had gone to the living room and was quietly crying on the couch. I still felt uncomfortable being near her, but I decided to speak. So you're worried about the baby? I asked. She nodded. Well, consider this child your salvation for now. But only for now. But once he's born, I'll do a DNA test. And if you lied to me and it's not my shore, do whatever you want. Run your damn test. I don't care. I'm sure whose child I'm carrying. Fine. I'll believe you for now. But you must cut off all communication with that scumbag and with Josh too. In fact, with Linda as well. What does Linda have to do with this? Rachel asked, puzzled by my request. I said, do it. And don't say a word about what you've already told me. You'll be staying home all the time. What'll but? Otherwise, I can't vouch for myself. I'll end both you and the baby. You won't dare. She tried to blackmail me. Do you want to test that? I raised my fist towards her. Rachel lowered her head, realizing I meant it. And she must have been really worried about the baby because she'd agreed to all my terms. And now that I'd sorted things out with my wife, accessorial poignance, I had to come up with a plan to get even with those two bastards who'd so cruelly decided to make fun of me. Why? I never would have thought of something like that. I wonder if Linda has any idea about this. She couldn't have failed to notice that Anthony was seeing my wife. He might as well have told her about his love affairs. But if she knew, then she's in on this conspiracy against me too. Etches. What did I ever do to them to make such a mockery of me? I moved to another room for the night. It was very unpleasant to be in the same bed with this woman who had deceived me. For a couple of days, I didn't let on that I already knew. On the contrary, I even called Josh and apologized, telling him that I was just drunk and jealous. But my wife assured me that it wasn't his or her fault. That call was the beginning of my revenge plan. But how exactly to get even with them, I was still thinking about. A few days later, my colleague returned from his vacation. He spent a couple of hours regaling me with stories about his trip. Listening to him, I realized how I could get back at my enemies. He told me about going on a hiking adventure with his family, exploring caves and climbing rocks. I made a mental note of it and started preparing for my payback. I visited a rough neighborhood and found a former classmate of mine. He'd had some bad luck in life and had gone the wrong way, joining a local gang. I bought some explosives from him and stashed them away for future reference. Then I called Josh. Listen, my friend. I wanted to apologize once more for my behavior. I know you're still upset with me, but please understand that I love Rachel so much. Oh, come on! I've already forgotten about it. That's what friends are for, to occasionally fight with them, he replied with a hint of irony. And I'm calling for a reason. I want to invite all of you for a little outing. Let's say it's a nature trip. What do you think? You do love outdoor adventures, I said, exploiting his weakness. You're right. What do you have in mind? He asked. How about this weekend we head into the mountains? I found a fantastic spot. The view is amazing and there's plenty to explore. Josh agreed, and he asked if Rachel was joining us. I told him she had decided to visit her sick mother. Restrained $6. Is it her sick mother in another city, but assured him it wouldn't affect our trip. I also convinced him to bring Anthony and Linda along, stating that the more, the merrier. Now I was looking forward to the weekend. I told Rachel to keep quiet and just in case. I even talked her into going to the hospital for a few days for a full checkup, telling her I was worried about the baby because she'd had a lot of stress recently. And I wanted to make sure she was okay. Rachel, hoping that I was almost over my resentment, immediately agreed. After I took her to the hospital, I drove to Josh's house, offering to drive them in my car. The three of them settled in my car with Josh taking the front seat. Josh kept asking where we were going, but I just said it was a surprise. When we finally arrived and they saw the beautiful mountainous landscape, Josh commented that I had hit the bullseye with his outdoor preferences. After a few hours of hiking on the slopes, we decided to set up camp for the night. By this time, I had led them to a disused mine entrance and proposed exploring it the next day. Josh and Linda were on board, and Anthony was overjoyed, like a child. I even began to question his sanity. A place to stay, and a few hours of night would give me a chance to prepare and have a major surprise for those bastards. I only felt sorry for Linda. From all the day's talk, I'd assumed she knew nothing of the devious plan of her husband and his nephew, and I wondered how I could keep her from the fate of her relatives. It's when we were almost ready for bed and drinking beer by the fire. I said I would go take a piss and get some more wood. I really had to go to the bathroom, but I also wanted to check out the place where I would carry out my revenge plan. But when I got a few meters away, I remembered that I'd forgotten my hiking bag where I'd been carrying the explosives, and I didn't want any of them to find it, and that would probably be Anthony, who was always messing up backpacks. I went back to get my bag, but as I approached, I heard Josh talking to his wife, trying not to be overheard by Anthony, who was standing nearby, looking at the stars. I have a feeling he's getting suspicious, Linda said. Oh, come on. Anthony is doing a great job playing his part, Josh replied. When I heard this, I thought that I was wrong about Linda and that she knew everything. But as I listened, I realized that wasn't what they were talking about. But he sometimes behaves in a way that could give us away. That's the story we came up with. How can you explain to your friend that your nephew never traveled abroad and just sat for several years in a mental institution? There's no way he'd hire him in his office. Linda, you have nothing to worry about. Anthony isn't stupid enough to admit it. I stood there in shock at what I had heard. Now I'm confused. What did this have to do with anything? Or were they preparing some other trick for me? Although, having learned about the asylum, I now understood a certain change in Anthony's behavior, and I wanted to kill him more and more. Besides suspecting that Rachel's baby might be his, I had changed my mind about the test, and now I was going to do it before the baby was born, so that I wouldn't give the offspring of a psycho like him a chance to exist. I stepped back a few meters to avoid suspicion that I had overheard their conversation, and then walked noisily, singing a song. Oh hey guys, didn't expect me back so soon, did you? I forgot my flashlight. I leaned over to my bag and quickly grabbed it. Josh and Linda sat in silence, looking at me. I walked away, leaving them behind, and went to the cave. After doing what I needed, I picked up an armful of dry twigs on the way back. The next day, we went to the old abandoned mine as we had intended. I deliberately led them farther into the depths, motivated by my interest. And when we reached the place specially prepared by me, I told them that I got so carried away that I forgot to call my wife at the agreed time. Asking them to wait for me for a while, I went to a safe distance, took out a remote control from my bag and pressed a button. There was an explosion. All three of them were buried under a pile of rubble and rocks. That's what I wanted. I didn't even feel sorry for Linda, because if she knew about the asylum Anthony was in, she knew about the rest. A cloud of dust and small rocks slid down the passage with great force and almost caught up with me. I realized that the explosion had been a little stronger than I had expected, and now I might have fallen into my own trap. But on catching up, I rushed to escape so I don't get caught. When I got home, I didn't tell anyone about anything. Nobody knew where we were going, and nobody would look for them in that place. I made up a fable for the police too, just in case, that I went to Josh's designated spot, but they never showed up. If you enjoyed this story, please like and leave a comment.